Hello, welcome to yet another edition of It's Your Time You're Wasting with me, David Didow, and this handsome gentleman,
That must be me, Martin Robinson.
Martin Robinson, Martin Debonair Robinson. Martin, how has your week gone? You look
I've
terribly
been very
healthy.
cultural, of course. I've been to a ballet, well, sort of ballet. It was Quadrophenia, the Who,
Oh,
the Who's
interesting.
musical
Was it
set
was it good?
to ballet, dance, and things like that. And it was the press night, so behind
Oh,
us, coming in on the red carpet, was Bob Geldof, would you believe, and various other luminaries from the past.
is that it?
It was that sort of thing, yes, and it
Yeah.
was it was wonderful. It's very good. I would recommend that to anyone
All
who wants to
right.
go. And have you seen the
Okay.
Ballad of Wallace Island, the film
No,
with Tim
I haven't.
Key? Tim Key's helped put it together. It's really, really good. Lovely
Is
little
it?
film. Lovely little film.
Right.
Yeah,
Tell me about.
bittersweet, funny,
Nice.
about a guy who pays for a folk duo to come to play on his island. Folk duo from the past, and it's
Ah,
it's it's lovely. It's a lovely
okay.
little very English film. And
Beautiful. I'll put that
yeah,
on the list. My youngest daughter's back from her travels and university and such like, and she's very good at dragging me to the cinema to see stuff. So
yeah.
uh, the right look. I'll look forward to that. Well,
What have you been doing?
what have I been? I've been working. I've been writing. And yeah, nothing of any interest really. I've all work and no play has made me a bit of a dull boy, I'm afraid.
Yes, that's right. And you're in a hotel, aren't you? You've been
I'm
thrown
in a
out of your
hotel.
house.
I'm in gorgeous Southampton. I can practically out that window. Oh no, out. Oh, actually, I haven't got a sea view in this room, but
Clearly
the
not.
hotel is literally over. No, I've got a view of a wall. It's quite a nice wall, but you can't see the sea. But we're spitting distance from the sea, and it's all. I get excited by being by the sea.
All right.
I feel all
Sandcastles?
vibrant and no, it's more like dot. I mean, have you been to Southampton?
I have, yes.
It's not really beachy, I don't think. I
No,
don't.
but
I mean,
I just think about your excitement of being near the sea. Is it
ah,
all sandcastles and trunks?
no, it's docks. I've told you. What's wrong with you?
No, I know what Southampton's like. I'm talking about your
Are you
excitement.
imagining me in my trunks, Martin? Not
No, I'm
again.
certainly not.
All right,
Certainly not.
okay. Well,
Oh,
if you were, it would be fine. It would be
oh,
absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with imagining a man in his trunks,
no.
especially.
Here we go.
Do you know, Martin? Maybe you don't. I've lost 12 kilo over the last few months.
Yeah. In
Yeah,
weight or
in
money?
weight.
Yeah, okay.
In weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, kilogram isn't a unit of
No,
money.
I know, but I
Martin.
just think of your pockets laden with pennies.
Ah, no, no. Yeah, no. I've got these. Yeah. So anyway, I'm feeling young and boyish
Oh
and
dear.
fit. I know.
Yes.
I'm running
Yeah. Oh, a
about.
fitness regime. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Did you
yeah.
run to
All of that.
Southampton?
I didn't run to
Yeah, you
Southampton.
see, you missed your
No,
opportunity there.
yeah. I mean, I would have needed to have left a week ago, I think,
Yeah,
to have
yeah.
made it in time. But so I chose not to do that. But
Right, okay.
I am going to park run every Saturday.
Okay. Lovely.
Got personal best last week. I'm now
Great.
running 5K. I know. No one cares. No one cares. Anyway, look, enough of this nonsense, Martin. Let's move into the
Asking people
topic.
to subscribe.
Oh, that's the look, we're 5 away from 1,000 people.
10,
And if
10,
you
10,
10,
11,
oh, well,
11 actually.
oh, God, we just lost one.
No, I hope not. We might
Oh
have done.
no. Look, just blummin' subscribe. Honestly. What's wrong with you? You shower. Anyway. Hopefully you'll do that. Hopefully you'll like the podcast and all that sort of thing. We're getting lots of downloads on the podcast. That's really lovely. So hopefully you're enjoying it. Anyway. Martin has picked out a story that we're going to talk about today. This is his baby, really. So I'm going to introduce it. I'm going to hand straight over to you, Martin. So, should schools teach queer theory? It's Pride Month. And the Times obviously decides to do its bit about a school diversifying its English curriculum to include the works of a drag queen and other non-binary authors, but I'm not sure that they approve. And there's another question which underlies this discussion, and that is, should children see themselves represented in the curriculum? How important is that? And in times of growing individualism and self-authorship, that's troublingly difficult to say. Yeah, in this time when we're all writing ourselves, is it even possible to represent the diversity of different identities that might be possible for somebody to have? Martin,
Yeah.
help us out.
It
What
comes
should we
from
do?
a school called Alleyn's, which is in southeast London, Dulwich.
It's quite a smart school, isn't it, Martin?
It's an independent school. It charges around £30,000 per annum for people to go there. So it's certainly not your average comp. Now, they've introduced authors as part of a 5-year overhaul, according to the Times, which they took, they say, from a blog post put out by the English department. Now, genuine diversification of the literature taught includes bringing in things that challenge white-centric, patriarchal and cisgender ideologies, says the piece. Now, the previous head of English explained that while the school had not forsaken the study of Shakespeare, it had diversified the curriculum in the hope that every pupil will come to see themselves in the texts being studied.
Quick clarify there. The previous head of English. So have they left? What's going on there?
I think it must be. I mean, I don't know the details beyond that, but that was published in 2023.
Okay.
The previous head had explained that.
Okay.
But
okay. I see. From this blog that you alluded to.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Now, the aim of doing so was to equip the students with empathy and confidence to challenge and dismantle sexism, racism, homophobia, indeed discrimination of any kind when they encounter it.
Sounds good.
As part of the diversification, the blog detailed how Year 12 pupils have been allowed to study a spoken word album by a non-binary author and an anthology compiled for Year 9 students that included the writings of someone called Panty Bliss, who I take it is a drag queen identity.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the works of Panty Bliss. Have you looked her up?
I haven't come across them myself, as they say. Meanwhile,
Martin,
pupils are being taught queer theory and queer readings of A-level texts, such as Dracula, in years 12 and 13. Can you give me any handle on what queer theory would be in the teaching of English in years 12 and 13?
Yeah, of course. So queer theory is a branch of critical theory, and critical theory in its simplest term, it's applying a particular critical lens to the analysis of a work. So you might take a text and say, well, I'm going to do a feminist reading, and you'd view the text through the lens of feminist theory, and you draw out parts of the text which maybe would be less visible or less obvious if you took a different lens. Other critical lenses you might take might include things like Freudian or Marxist. So if you were taking a Marxist lens, you'd be really looking at class and power relate dynamics and that kind of thing. If you're doing the Freud, the psycho, I forget, I'm losing it now. The blah, 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 the
Freudian.
Yeah, no, Freudian. It's not. Yeah, it's not really called that. Anyway, psycho something. I've completely gone from my head. But what you'd be basically looking there is for willies and that sort of thing, and all that sort of
penis
stuff.
Envy, isn't that what it used to be about?
Yeah, lots of that. So you'd be looking at lots of phallic objects and going, oh, look at the way they've described the table. Goodness me, that kind of thing. I'm caricaturing unforgivably there. So I'm not being so and it's got a rich intellectual heritage. I think it comes from the people like Adorno in the 1930s in the
The
Frankfurt
Frankfurt
School.
School. Yeah,
Yeah,
there you
yeah,
go.
exactly. And it sort of really came from trying to apply Marxist readings to text, and so unlike traditional theory, kind of your F.R. Leavis, I.A. Richards approach to literary analysis, which is often sort of taking believing of itself that it's neutral. Critical theory would be seen as normative in as much as it judges society and argues for emancipation from a particular set of beliefs or
Okay,
paradigms.
so
Queer theory, it
last
really,
week you were sort of
yeah,
saying that English language as a
yeah.
study doesn't really have canonical texts of its own, but if it does have
Mm.
some sort of canon, then critical theory would be an important part of that, or not?
Well, yeah, I think definitely at university study. I think it's not, it doesn't tend to be specified in A level, but it's a fun game. Whenever I've taught A level literature, I've always introduced my students to elements of critical theory. They quite enjoy it. It's
Right.
quite fun to sort of say, okay, you're going to do a feminist reading, you're going to do a Marxist reading, you're going to do a Freudian reading, and look at the different things that they might get. So queer theory, from that perspective, is another lens. It's another stance that you can take for the exploration of a text. What it would specifically do is argue that male and female, gay and straight, aren't fixed or natural, that they're socially constructed, they're shaped by power relations, and the idea would be to question norms, assumptions within a text, and sort of disrupt binary views of male and female, gay and straight, and
Right.
explore how language and culture would
Okay.
could be
It
viewed in that way.
it says, I mean, the Times has again brought out things that the school's study of the Tempest in Year 7
Yeah.
explored the inherent problems of colonialism. And that doesn't seem a big leap to me from the Tempest, but
No, and I mean, that's quite common, to be honest.
yeah.
That's quite common that the English departments look at the Tempest as an example of early colonial literature. I mean, I think that's a sort of I think you could do that. You can do that, but I think the danger of doing it in year 7 is that very often, in my experience, it's presented to 11-year-olds as like, this is what the play's about, and I think that's not very helpful or
Okay.
very fair to them,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Okay. What
So,
about
so
the toxicity of Macbeth's masculinity at GCSE level?
yeah, so I think again, it's not a very subtle, nuanced way of exploring the play, and I think it's fine to position that against other readings.
Hmm.
So you've got a 16-year-olds, and you're saying, okay, so we can apply the lens of toxic masculinity, and we can look at the decisions that are being made here. We can look at gender relationships and all the rest of it. But like honestly, Macbeth doesn't really, it doesn't really apply that well to Macbeth. I think there are much more interesting and sophisticated readings to make of his behaviour, and what he does and what he says than that. And so, the, not that I'm saying that this is what they're doing, but were it to be the case that you were only doing that, I think you would be limiting
Hmm.
students.
But
So hopefully they're not doing that.
there's lots of readings as well, isn't it, that blames it all
Yeah.
on Lady Macbeth anyway.
Well, absolutely, and I think that's a really good counter narrative to look at those sorts of things, and also the inherent, the inherent misogyny of like all of the villain figures being female in terms of their influence on Macbeth, the witches and Lady Macbeth. Yeah, so
So,
there are interesting
mm,
things that you can do, and
right.
and clearly as a female character, Shakespeare's doing something very interesting and very provocative for his contemporary viewers with that character.
Okay. Well, the Times
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're doing that. The way it comes across is they could be distorting quite a lot here of what was in the whole of the blog,
The
obviously, the
Times
blog
of
post.
London, Martin, really?
So perhaps they're playing a little game here. I don't know. But
Hmm.
they did approach Alleyn's school, and Alleyn's school said this, according to the Times. This is
Yeah.
quoted: "We have no interest in engaging with this debate. We are happy to be judged on our excellent results and the obvious enjoyment of our curriculum by our pupils. We are proud to balance tradition and innovation in our curriculum." Well, first and foremost, that's a really strong statement in to support your own teachers, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
Which is good to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, schools are always in an impossible position when they're in the media for some sort of storm, and it's interesting that it's almost interesting that they've commented as much as they have, and we can infer from the little they have said, as much as you have then. I think it's very unfair to put schools in that position of responding to, what might be nonsensical articles, but they're not denying anything. And I think the idea that they're not interested in taking part in the debate is an interesting one, because at some level they must be interested in taking part in a debate, because they're making, they've publicly made a choice,
To put it on a blog
which
post.
they put it on a blog post, and it's of sufficient interest to make it into the Times, and clearly, they're a fee paying school, and parents can make a decision about whether that's the place that they want their children to go to, and I think that's absolutely, I've got no problem at all with that.
Now,
I am
obviously, go on.
interested
Go on.
in their excellent results, because they're obviously they're highly selective. So if they weren't excellent, that would be awful.
There's obviously a counter argument, and the Times also puts in a counter argument throughout this article and another article which preceded this one by about a week. Alka Segal Cuthbert, who's director of the campaign group Don't Divide Us, and a former English teacher,
Yeah, I've met
criticised
Alka a couple of
Alleyn's
times.
approach to diversifying its curriculum as following a strategy in literature that sees works of art as instruments to change beliefs deemed to be reactionary or irrelevant.
I mean, without knowing exactly what they're doing, it's really difficult to say if that's true or not. I probably would have not said that, if the Times ever made the mistake of it's probably why they don't approach me for interviews, Martin, because I'm pretty bland. Yeah, I mean, maybe depends what they do.
Well, she says to teach the toxicity of Macbeth's character or applying a queering lens to Dracula indicates the breathtaking narcissism based on the false premise that the teacher's sensibilities are so superior to anything in the past, including the books and the authors themselves.
I don't know. Dracula's pretty homoerotic, right?
There's a new film coming out soon, apparently.
Wow. And did you see Nosferatu?
I didn't. The remake.
Oh, it's really good.
Not
No,
the one from my
well,
youth.
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, no, not the one from you. Yeah, no. Really, really great. I really enjoyed it. Really, really great. Sort of grotesqueness to it, but beautiful cinematography, and it's so it's such a rip off of Bram Stoker, but in a sort of splendid way. It's like a page for page sort of. Everything's the same, but I think actually ends up being slightly better than Dracula. But that's an opinion. Anyway, who cares about that? But it's a good film. I recommend it.
There you go. Well, there's also Frankenstein coming out as a film soon as well.
Yeah,
So it's
harder, I would say, sort of more interesting and more difficult to apply a queering lens to Frankenstein. But I'd be up for it.
Well, we'll listen out for that one. Perhaps
let's go for it.
One of your Substacks, perhaps.
Well, maybe you'd like to get in on that, Martin.
So focusing on different, right? So yeah, sorry, Catherine Birbalsingh, believe it or not, has comments.
Britain's strictest headmistress, Martin. I don't know if you knew that.
She's at a conference for the Family Education Trust, which campaigns for traditional family values.
I'll bet they do.
And Birbal Singh said, "I am the most diverse person you'll ever find in terms of my background. Focusing on pupils' different backgrounds creates division, not unity. Schools do the wrong thing by splitting children into ethnic, religious, or LGBT groups, but teachers admired in white guilt and desperate for diversity days." And this is where the connection comes. She was aware of one independent school in London, which she declined to name, that had abandoned all Shakespeare in favour of teaching the great works of Panti Bliss, an Irish drag queen and gay rights activist.
So I've now found out the works of Panti Bliss. If
Right.
you're interested, if you want, there's Woman in the Making, and If These Wigs Could Talk.
There you go.
So maybe we can put a link to the great works of Panti Bliss in the notes.
So
I'm sure they're very good.
she also brought up the Royal Shakespeare Company provides schools with teaching materials that encourage the study of plays such as Othello and The Merchant of Venice using anti-bias and anti-racist methods. Again, is that all too surprising with those two texts?
Yeah. It's a really interesting one that I think there's two quite different schools of thought about this. So that there are schools that would say, right, let's put Othello on because we're gonna, we've got a bit of like diversity in terms of characters, and we've got a black man in there playing the lead, as the lead character. But like not necessarily presented in a particularly flattering light. So, and the same with Shylock in Merchant of Venice. It's a tricky one. I went to see a production. I can't remember who it was by now, but a production of Merchant of Venice where Shylock was played by a woman very well. And then at the end, they do this recreation of the Cable Street riots.
Yeah.
And do you know the one I'm talking about?
I think it was recent.
Very recent. And that was, what. So I saw it at the Theatre Royal in Bath, and Bath or Bath, darling, depending on where you're from in the country, it's not a particularly diverse town, and so it was like a deeply uncomfortable experience watching it because I thought, making some quite sophisticated points, and the audience, damn them, were laughing at the wrong things.
You can't have
that. They were sort of like, oh, well, let's have a quick racist chuckle. I mean, I'm sort of, obviously, I'm being a little bit... You
can't trust the groundlings.
No, you can't. And I imagine that when that's put on, at the... wherever it was put on, National Theatre, I imagine you get a different class of clientele, darling.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's true.
Well, Birbal Singh points out that I know Shakespeare is dead, white and male, but will all the talking about anti-racism just make you feel better about your white guilt? She's not against talking about racism and sexism. She failed to understand, though, how they can be presented as a theme while studying Shakespeare. From what you're saying, of course they can be a theme.
Well, I mean, I think a little bit. I think that's, and this is for me, this is a bit of a big deal, Martin, and a bit of a live debate. I would say they are categorically not themes in the way that they're presented sometimes. That's not what the plays are about, but certainly they're part of the presentation of the play. And I think theme is taught very badly most of the time. And so to that extent, I can I've got a certain amount of sympathy with what she might be saying, although, knowing Catherine, goodness knows what she means. But well, it's not always obvious, is it? I think it's fair to say.
Well, it's also, it could be,
and it gets distorted, and who knows?
Context,
I wouldn't want to put words in her mouth or anything like that. But I think that if the thing I was going to say about Othello is that you've chosen to put that on because you want to represent a different character. I've had the experience of visiting schools, and that they're studying plays like Othello, or reading novels like Of Mice and Men, and that some of the students in the class who are from ethnically diverse backgrounds are like, this isn't great. This doesn't feel good. Why are we doing this?
Mm.
The me that I'm seeing in the curriculum represented is not a me I want to see.
Mm.
And I think that's really, really, really important to remember. And I think the thing about Shakespeare is, I mean, he's definitely dead. We don't really know if he's white or male. We just, that's a convention, isn't it? I mean, almost certainly was, but it kind of doesn't matter. And the voice that I always have echoing in my mind
Mayor Angelou.
is Maya Angelou, writing about. I don't know if you've ever read I Know Why the Cage Bird
Mm.
Sings,
Mhm.
but when she writes about some of her really kind of unpleasant experiences as a young child, and then encountering Shakespeare's sonnets, and talking about the fact that she could not accept that he was a white dude, that he seemed to speak so directly to her experience, and that when her teachers were telling her this is a white guy, she was really upset to
Mm.
like, that can't be right. That's, I don't believe you. You're
Okay,
making that
so
up in order to.
when we talk about representing us,
Yeah,
there are works
yeah,
out there that, and this is where people do get
yeah,
into controversy, the idea of the universal, that there are universal things that we attach ourselves to and see ourselves within a work of art, a piece of
yeah,
music. So if you
yeah,
listen to a piece of music, it can register with you and be completely, out of your experience, even hearing that type of music
yeah,
before. The person who made that type of music might have nothing to do with you, but that piece of music can speak to you in ways that you don't understand. I mean, music particularly works in through the emotions, and all sorts of different ways. So you're not seeing yourself, but you're feeling
no.
something about yourself, shall we say?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, the fact that Catherine describes herself as like the most diverse person, in the room, and I think it's probably true of a lot of the rooms that she's in. The diversity that we don't talk about representing necessarily is diversity of opinion,
Mm,
and that might be as important as any other kind of diversity.
maybe I was. I actually came to the defence of Catherine the other day. I think
Oh yeah,
on Twitter X or whatever. I mean, the
she
amount,
gets a lot of horrible racism, doesn't she?
huge amount of racist abuse coming
Yeah,
towards her. I mean,
disgusting. Yeah,
and
absolutely awful.
it's from the
Just,
right. It's from the
I
right. A
mean,
lot of it,
yeah,
you know.
it's just sickening. Yeah.
So anyway,
Um,
writing on social media, Panty Bliss said something on
Anti
Blue
Bliss.
Sky. She said, "This is the second time this woman, Britain's strictest head teacher, has claimed there's a secret school in London she won't name that has replaced Shakespeare with me. It's complete bullshit, of course, but why is she so obsessed with me?" Well, we'll never know. We could always ask Catherine
We'll
why,
never. Yeah, we could ask
if
Catherine.
indeed she's obsessed. Anyway, look, this school, Alleyn School,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a
Well,
private school. It charges a lot. Surely
yeah,
the great thing that people have been talking about, have been upset about, again on the right, a lot of people
yeah,
upset about
yeah,
VAT being added to school fees and things like that.
yeah.
And, but one of the extraordinary sort of dilemmas for people on the right is that schools who charge so much for fees in London seem to be
Mhm.
part, surprisingly, of some sort of elite. The elites that these people on the right perhaps have been attacking
Can
for
you
all this
believe it?
time. No, now surely they
Extraordinary.
have the right, because they're an independent school, to do what they damn well like. They're independent.
They do have the right to do what they damn well like, and that's fine. I think from my perspective, the children who go to Elaine's, they're going to be fine. It doesn't matter. uh, and almost that they, because they come from such privilege, maybe it is really great that they have to encounter some things which might potentially alter their worldviews. Would I want to expend valuable curriculum time, precious curriculum time, or studying Panty Bliss in a comprehensive school? And maybe not. I don't know. I've yet to read the works of Panty Bliss.
Mm.
Maybe they are really, really good. So I don't want to prejudge that. But I'm assuming that that they might be of sufficient quality for me to recommend them and say, yeah, go and read Panty Bliss. It's great. It's terrific. It's a lot of fun. I will read it. I will have a go. Her most recent one, If These Wigs Could Talk. I'm going to get a copy and on Audible and have a listen. Maybe I'll finish that by next week, and I
Does she
can
read them
report in.
herself?
I don't know. I'll
There you
find
go.
out. Hopefully, I'd like to think so. Anyway, the point being there, I don't mean this in a really horrible way. It's like, I don't care what they do at Alleyn's. It just doesn't matter. Those
Mm.
children are going to be fine despite anything that happens there.
Mm. The majority of them, one would think. I mean, not all of them,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah,
But you know,
but no,
yeah,
but
I
but
know
what
what
I'm
you mean.
saying is,
I know what you mean.
what I'm saying is their experience at the school, or certainly the curriculum that they study, is largely irrelevant.
Mm. I mean, but racism is clearly, like we're saying about
Yeah, it's
the abuse that Catherine gets, and
yeah,
it's clearly an
awful.
issue. It's becoming a louder issue because of the way that social media brings groups of people together and has much less control from the centre than it used to have, certainly in the case of Twitter. Should schools teach, that this is wrong, that racism is wrong? Isn't that part of what schools should do?
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm
in
so
terms,
sorry. I've
no,
accidentally
sorry,
eaten a
you've eaten
biscuit.
at the wrong time, haven't you?
I know. I feel
But
like I've got a really clear memory in my mind, Martin, of John Peel, listening to John Peel, and the record he played was too short, and he came back on and he went, "Oh, I'm really terribly sorry, you've caught me eating a scone." And I thought that was genius. I loved it. John Peel.
But yeah, so schools
May
do
you
have
rest in
some
peace.
sort of
Sorry.
social duty to
Mm.
society to it's not just
Yeah, of
about
course.
teaching exams. It's not just about individual pupils getting stuff out of school. It's also about
No.
talking about building society, building adding to the culture or adding to the understanding of culture and different cultures as well. And if that's not done in the English curriculum and the history curriculum, then where is it done?
PHSE?
So it could be 3 lessons or something.
I mean, you look. What are you saying about PHSE there? Are you
Well,
saying it's
no,
not very good?
PHSE has everything thrown at it, is what I'm saying
Yeah,
about
no, I know.
PHSE.
No,
And
yeah. So look, I do get a little bit like, oh, look, English can do that. I find that a little bit like, why can't maths do it? You know, why don't they have a go? Why don't they give up some of their curriculum time to talk about queer theory? Why not? Um, it's a little bit sort of unnecessary, perhaps, but it's yeah. I've got no objection to people to people buying into these sorts of things, but I do think that we have to be really, really thoughtful about how they're managed within the curriculum, and maybe this is something that's going to come out of the review that's currently taking place. Maybe we'll get a bit more guidance about how that works. Maybe that it'd be nice to see a recommendation where PHSE was a bit more beefed up.
hmm.
I'd be all for that.
Going back to the idea that also came up about children seeing themselves in the
Mm.
curriculum, and this goes through all subjects, not just
Yeah.
English, but I mean English
No, of
is one of
course.
the most obvious places, but
Hmm.
all subjects sort of come along in this tick box way, perhaps,
Yeah.
of saying, well, have we got an author from the Indian subcontinent? Have we got an author, from Africa? Have we got a black British author? Have we got a black American? I
Hmm.
mean, in the end, you can end up with just a complete tick box list and no coherence or cohesiveness in the curriculum itself, unless you're very, very good at
Yeah.
picking authors that actually do have a sort of conversation with each
Yeah,
other,
that's
perhaps.
true. But I think at the same time, I think particularly if you look at some of the A-level English literature specs, it's quite hard to find. If you look at the sort of poetry anthologies for some of the boards, really hard to find any women
But would
in the
that be different
selection.
for the 19th century novel, though, would it?
Uh,
Or
well,
don't?
I mean, I think it's very, very easy to study English literature and not study the works of any women.
Right. Is that because of the quality of
No, of course it
poetry?
isn't. It's because of
Not,
it's
I mean,
because
not
of it's
contemporary.
because
Not
of
contemporary.
structural bias.
Is it yeah, but the structural bias that's been there for a long time, and therefore, if you're
So
studying
yeah,
literature,
yeah.
if you're studying Greek literature, Sappho,
Yeah, yeah, there's Sappho. Of course there is. No, you're
but
right. Now, if you're studying the classics, you're going to be studying a lot of dead white men. There
hmm.
is no doubt. Um, but if you're studying English literature, then there are so many opportunities to study the wonderful works written by women that it seems quite pointed not to.
And do you think that's part of all A-level exam boards?
Uh, so I don't know them all in sufficient depth. It is true of AQA.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Should we see ourselves in the curriculum?
I think we should feel ourselves in the curriculum.
Right. Well, that's.
Yeah. So
Is that like
should
I said
should
earlier about the music thing?
yeah. I think it absolutely is. Should we select the curriculum so that everybody finds somebody that looks superficially like them? No, I think that's a really bad way of organising a curriculum. But do I think, should we, where there are great opportunities, should we take every opportunity to seek out, build connections between this and that, and to show how different writers have connected with and thought about the same issues, and to give as wide and broad an experience as possible? Yes, absolutely.
So a broad range of themes, a broad range of genres, a broad range of style. What?
Well, so for instance, if I was doing a study of tragedy, so in the curriculum that I wrote for the trust that I used to work for, we had a unit of work on tragedy, and one of the key texts in there was "Things Fall Apart" by Chinua Achebe, and it's
The
a
Bee
great
Gees?
example. We didn't have the Bee Gees, no. Um,
Sorry. Carry on.
behave, Martin, behave. It's a great example, and it's beautifully written, and the Okonkwo, the protagonist, has a great tragic arc, and it made complete sense to have that text as one of a range with which we looked at that concept of tragedy. Absolutely. So just as an example, so one of the things that we would always sort of, like, for instance, we looked at Beowulf,
Hmm.
and we didn't just look at bits of Heaney and things like that. We also used some of the translation written by Maria Headley, a sort of almost a feminist translation of Beowulf, which is great. I'd really encourage anyone who likes a bit of Beowulf to read hers. It's fantastic. It starts with the what, the first word, which sometimes gets
Hmm.
translated as listen or hark. She translates it as bro,
Okay.
which is like a brilliant scene setting, and it change. It's like this male boasting thing, which
Hmm.
is absolutely appropriate to the text, and it's just a brilliant thing to show children and go, look what someone's doing. Look at what they found. Look at how this brings it to life in a new and interesting way. When we look at
Is it a true way? Is it? I mean, is it a
yeah,
way?
it's absolutely. You could just imagine, like, couple of blokes at a bar going, "All right, mate," and
Yeah.
just let me tell you about this, and it's absolutely feels real. Yeah, absolutely. And then when we looked at Chaucer, we found every opportunity to look at to use Patience Bagby's telling tales. You can't use many of them with children younger than 16 because they're pretty fruity, but there's some brilliant moments in there, and she does this sort of hip hop sort of grime retelling of the Canterbury Tales with as someone who pays extraordinary attention to the original text
Right,
in the
this
same
all
way.
sounds like it would upset the Times, certainly.
Oh,
So
good.
so
Anything at the Times has got to be a great thing, hasn't it? You know, things like Zadie Smith's Wife of Willesden,
mm,
I think is a brilliant thing to put alongside The Wife of Bath and go, look at how these texts are speaking to each other.
right,
Look at
so
the respect that Zadie Smith has for Chaucer, and look at what she's doing with it. Look at what she's
mm,
making us think about.
yeah.
Look at how she's reimagining that character for the modern time. I love that.
So
Always.
to get works of art to converse with each other, some of which already are conversing with each other, of
Yeah.
course, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
famously so in quite a few occasions, just talking about texts which perhaps have a colonial
Yeah.
heart of
Yeah.
darkness, famously, you know.
Part of, well, yeah. And so Achebe calls Conrad, you know, whatever else he is, a thoroughgoing racist.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great conversation to
But
have.
that Things Fall Apart is doing that, though.
Yeah.
Is talking with
Yeah.
that one. But it also brings about the question, what is a self? If we're looking for our self within something, I mean, what are we? Are we actually made up biologically? Are we social, cultural creatures? Is it a skin color? Even that's more difficult to ascertain. I mean, my grandmother was black, you know, I mean, you can't see that in me. So is sexuality more relevant than age? If we think about the age of someone, should we see 6-year-olds in the curriculum, perhaps to the point of this is reductio ad absurdum, but do we get to the
So,
point where
well, I think
the
that,
only things a 6-year-old can study are the works of other 6-year-olds, or even to make it even worse, is to the only thing you can study as a child in school is your own writing, because that's the only thing that's relevant to you.
yeah. Okay. I mean, so as you say, it is reductio ad absurdum. And I don't think anyone would want to make the argument that you should only study your own works,
Except me.
such as they are. Yeah, unless, I mean, I'm all for making a case that we study Martin Robinson at great
Shakespeare
depth.
might have thought, just study me, guys. What's the point with all the others, you know?
Yeah, maybe. And there's relatively few people that would be able to make the case that he could
Mm.
potentially make. Yeah. Yeah. So look, as I say, I don't think you know, I don't think we should select items for the curriculum based on is everyone going to feel equally represented. I don't think that should be our mechanism, but should we take opportunities to look at how things speak to each other, how things evolve, how things build on and are in conflict? You know, one of the things that one of the conversations that I sometimes have with English teachers. I've worked with a few schools, a network of schools who've blessed them, had the curriculum that I've written imposed on them, and they sort of come back and say, "Well, you know, we don't want to do this stuff," and it's
Mm.
like we don't believe in whatever it is, whatever the hell. And you know, my point of view is, look, it's not my decision that you do it, but two, the whole idea of children finding themselves and seeing themselves in the curriculum, that's your job. That's up to you to make them feel that. And I feel that if you've got great literature and a decent English teacher, it's pretty hard for children not to find themselves in the curriculum.
Right, in the way we're talking about Maya Angelou finding herself in
Yeah, I
Shakespeare and
think
things like
so.
that. But
I
also,
think
is
so.
there,
I think that's more important.
yeah,
But then I'm
there's,
saying that, you know, we're I mean, obviously I'm a as we've the bombshell you've just dropped, I'm a lot whiter than you are. So you know, we're speaking as two old white blokes, not quite dead yet, but you know, probably quite soon. You know, we're like there's no doubt that some people listening to this, oh, you would say that, wouldn't you? Because you know you feel threatened, and I don't think. I mean, you know, maybe, but I don't think that is the case. I think that I think that what happens, particularly in subjects like English, where there is so much choice and discernment and subjectivity, I think that there is a tendency of some teachers to say, look, I know all of this stuff. I've studied Shakespeare and I've studied Chaucer and I've studied all of these works of literature, and I don't think they kind of do a good enough job, and I don't think they're diverse enough. And therefore, I'm going to make a decision on behalf of my students that they can't have access to what I've had access to. And I object to that. I think it's like pulling up the drawbridge after ourselves and going, you can have something else. And it's not at all to say I would never ever advocate for a curriculum which said we should all think Shakespeare's great. We should just sort of pay homage. What I want children to do is to be able to argue with the curriculum that they're presented with and go, but that's not very good because, but for them to be able to say that, they've got to know something about it. That ignorance is in nobody's interest. And for them to have an informed objection, then they've got to have an experience. And the sort of curriculum that I would want children to have is one where their teacher said, look, I'm going to show you this in warts and all, with all its, we're going to talk about the reasons that it's studied. We're going to talk about the reasons that we might not want to study it. What do you think?
Yeah.
And ask them.
There's also the point that the curriculum is just, or should be, I mean, in some schools it's become the be all and end all of the entire school day, and that's it, is based around the curriculum, based around the exam and all those things. In other schools, you have a wider curriculum. You have the extracurricular activities. You have the school library.
Co-curricular.
The co-curricular, but the school library as well, which is well stocked with books. And remember the days when there was an excellent school librarian who would guide you towards certain things that you might be interested in and help you. So the educative role of the school librarian isn't just the curriculum. It's also saying, well, hang on,
you can just get AI to do that now, Martin. Tell me a book I'd like.
An AI. Well, it could do. I mean, it could say what book, but then you've got to have the book available to you. And if you come from a poor background necessarily, or a background with few books in the house, or any, then perhaps going to the school library is something that would help.
Put in our AI request to the school library, which then prints the copy of the book that we want live. That's the shiny vision of the future, isn't it, Martin?
Anyway. It's been fun. An exploration of the whys and wherefores of...
So, there are a few things that we haven't talked about in this. One of them is... one of them, which we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, is like, what does queer mean? I think it's a fascinating argument. And I remember coming across an article some years ago that Laurie Penny wrote, where she was identifying as queer, but she's also a straight woman married to a man. And it's like, oh, okay, what do you mean you're queer? Like, what's going on with that? And I think that's really, really fascinating, really, really interesting sort of discussion to have, that, in those terms, queer isn't even really about sexuality. It's more that positioning yourself as being queer is being non-conformist, as having views and beliefs which are non-traditional in some potentially sort of vague, undefined way. And
this also upset Julie Bindell, I think it was, who's upset about using
she's
that
furious.
term.
And I was seeing on Twitter today, I can't remember the details of it, but at UCL there was a conference where for lesbians discussing, what it is to be a lesbian and what's important about being a lesbian, and they didn't let men who were identifying as lesbians speak, and there were these big student protests going, and they're like saying, "Fuck off! We don't want men in here telling us what lesbians should do, because that's not who we are." And obviously it's hugely controversial and hugely inflammatory to all of these different groups. And
It's
There's no,
policing the borders of identities. It's very difficult,
is. It
actually.
is. It is. It's kind of really interesting to see, and I think that these are struggles of our time. We're going
Mm.
through this live. We're trying to, it's unprecedented. This particular struggle, we don't know how it will end. We've had some recent legislation which makes it possible for people to say lesbians are not men,
Yeah.
and you can't come in.
Well,
Whatever you think of that, and we're grappling with this stuff. We
mm.
don't know how it's going to end, and obviously,
There
I'm not.
obviously some people would say there are borders there that are quite clear on
Yeah,
certain things, and one of which is sex.
yeah.
Male, you're
But
either
there are
male
other
or
people to
female.
say that those borders are not clear at all.
Yeah, and that
Well, there are,
no,
and there
no,
are,
the
and
people, the
and
trans community. I mean, are saying that they are. Some are saying that they are female. Some trans people say they are male still, but
do you want a really spicy take that'll get us into trouble?
not particularly. But go on.
Okay, I won't then. I won't.
That's. I don't see why we should get into trouble. Who's the
Oh,
spicy take from?
I mean, so no, I mean, this is a huge generalization, but when we talk about sort of some of the trans protesting, all of the trouble seems to be caused by male to female trans people, and the female to male trans community seem to be like really chill and relaxed and really not causing anybody any problems. Everyone's really happy with that, and the take is, God, it's bloody men.
Hmm.
It's always bloody men.
Unless you're
I
identifying as a
know.
man. So
Yeah, exactly. So there you are. Call in, get me cancelled. Tell everyone why you hate me. But at least you made it right to the end of the show. And you can now, if you haven't already, you can remember to subscribe or like or comment
all
or
those things.
another way. Yeah, tell us what you think. Have we got it really wrong? Should queer theory be taught in schools?
And from what you were saying, it is and it should be.
I think it can be. There's no problem at all. I don't, but that's an opinion.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
I think it was. If it was all you did, I'd be
No,
a bit worried.
that would be
But should it be?
ridiculous.
Should
Yeah.
it? Should children be introduced to it? Oh, why not?
And on that note,
On that note, thank you
see
very
you next
much,
time.
everybody.
Bye
Have a
bye.
lovely evening.